With the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who coming out, and the show being on since 1963, let's put that into perspective. I was born in 2002. There have been many people to take on the role of the Doctor, the same as there have been many people who have taken on the roles of different Time Lords, such as Rassilon and the Master in Doctor Who. One of my favourite Doctors, however, is Peter Capaldi, who started his run in 2013 and ended his run in 2017. Something that I think entices people to watch the 12th Doctor and Peter Capaldi acting as the 12th Doctor is the fact that he brings such a darkness towards the Doctor that is reminiscent of David Tennant's Doctor as well, and similar as well to Christopher Eccleston's Doctor. They're the older, grittier Doctors I think that people like more because it's not the fun, light-hearted stuff anymore. It's the dark, it's the depressing, it's the loss of companions, it's the loss of the mental state of the Doctor, which I think draws people in. Which happens a lot in his seasons, and his episodes, really. It happens so often in his seasons that you barely get any of the light-hearted moments, especially with his companions. Let's start, first and foremost, with his first episode, Deep Breath, which I think was a great introduction for a Doctor. We see a very similar state for him as David Tennant's Doctor, where they are in a state of confusion, they don't really know who they are, and something that I love about his Doctor is that he has a Scottish accent and he is confused as to why he has that. He also recognises his face and knows that it's a face he's seen before, but he's not too sure where he's seen the face before, and we'll get back to that later. I think it's interesting that in this episode he has a very different relationship with Clara than he did to his previous incarnation from 11. And I actually really enjoyed, and continue to enjoy, the first ever meeting between the 12th Doctor and Clara, and then the end of their run together. I think their relationship progresses so well, and I think that Stephen Moffat did a great job at portraying the differences from the start right to the end of when Clara leaves the show. I really enjoyed it. And the funny moments of where he's still not too sure who Clara is, or he's not too sure how he should react to Clara. And I love the moment where he gets confused in the heights between Strax and Clara. It makes me laugh every time. He's a genuinely, and I think unintentionally funny Doctor. I think he doesn't intend to be funny, but he ends up being funny anyway, and I like it. We won't linger too long on the first episode, because I think however much I love the introduction of the 12th Doctor in that first episode, the episode itself doesn't really have that much in it. It's not like, for example, the first episode of David Tennant's run. It's not very similar to the first episode of Christopher Eccleston's or Matt Smith's, really. It's very much an episode on its own, and it doesn't really follow any of the same characteristics as any of the beginning episodes for any other Doctor. It follows more about the relationship he used to have with Clara, which is, I would have thought that it would be similar to Ten and Rose, because Rose used to be with the 9th Doctor, but it really isn't. And I think it is because he's an older man, he's an older Doctor. It's not the same relationship that Clara has with 11, which was a romantic relationship. It's a deep friendship that they will start from this very first episode and will end when Clara leaves. And once again, I said I'll get back to that later. But I think something that really interests me about this episode is actually the lasting and left message from the 11th Doctor to Clara. In that scene, and it's a really emotional scene, where Clara gets a phone call from 11 right at the end in Trenzalore. And I think it's such an emotional message for her because of the lasting memory that she has. And something that I love as well is the reaction from the 12th Doctor saying, I want you to see me. I I wish you could see me, right? Because she's so focused and so caught up in the fact that the 11th Doctor had just spoken to her and that he must still be there. So who is this man? Who is he? He's not the Doctor then. But then she comes to realise, and she looks at him and she realises that he is the Doctor, just not the one that she's already seen. And I think I love that beginning of their relationship and their friendship building right from that moment of, okay, you're not the Doctor that I've been travelling with, but you are still my Doctor. And I love that scene a lot, and I think it's a testament to Stephen Moffat's writing, really, that it makes you really invested into where their story's going to go from there. Because we've already seen what the relationship between Clara and a Doctor has been like, but not this Doctor. And I think it's interesting. Now, jumping from the first episode of his season to the 7th episode of his season, Kill the Moon, which I think is actually a very controversial episode. It's not an episode that people usually like, and whenever people go through the lists of Peter's run, it's usually the episode that people go, I don't like it, I'm not interested in it, and I see where they're coming from. It's not the best episode that is in this season. I think it is one of the kind of mid episodes of this season, but it does have some interesting conversations in it. One of my favourite scenes from this episode is where Clara confronts the Doctor and says, this is Earth and you breathe our air, you are here to save us. Why are you making us plan these things out? Why are you making me plan it out? Why have you given me this task of, I can destroy the Earth if I do something wrong? That shouldn't be something that you allow me to do. That should be something that you help us with. And he acts as if it's their fault and their choice. Which I think is actually interesting. And I think people neglect that part of that episode. It's important. It's important to who his Doctor is, with, oh, right, he's not as kind, and he's not as, he's not as reliable as a Doctor as we've seen previous incarnations to be. He actually wants his companions and humans to do it themselves. He doesn't really want himself to help. He wants them to learn it themselves. And I think actually that might be a fatal flaw of his Doctor in itself. Because as we see later on, and I'll talk about that later as well, giving humans the choice and him taking a sideline and going, no, I want you to make these choices yourself because you are part of the human race. You own the Earth. You live there. I'm just a bystander. I come and help when you need it. And this is not a situation where you need my help. He did that later on. And once again, I'll talk about that later. But I think in this episode specifically, it does show who his Doctor is. And the relationship he has with Clara, and also the downside of his relationship with Clara. Because Clara as a character is a very outspoken person. She is a very independent woman. She wants to be with the Doctor. But if he can't help, and that, in her eyes, is the main reason he's there, and his main job to help the Earth and to help other planets, then what's his purpose? And I think that's what she was saying in that episode. And it is important, as I said. And however much people don't like that episode, it is important for his character development as the Doctor. Now, from the 7th episode to the 11th and 12th episodes, Dark Water and Death in Heaven. Some of my favourite episodes from him, especially in his first ever season, and I think it was a great decision to add these stories in his first season as like a cliffhanger ending. Not a cliffhanger ending, but you get what I mean. Like a bookend of his first season. We'll start with Dark Water first. The fact that they introduced a character in The Caretaker which was a couple of episodes before that in Danny Pink, and then immediately writing him off in the 11th episode in the same season, it was a major, risk, especially because that's a relationship that Clara has with someone. That's a character who's only just been introduced as a relationship other than the Doctor for a companion. Very similarly to Rose and Mickey in the Ninth Doctor's run. Introducing a character like that and getting rid of them, I think, was an interesting choice, especially for this episode in specific. This episode in general is a very good episode. It basically follows the line, if you've seen it, and I'm sure you have if you've watched all of Peter's run, a story about the Cybermen, right? About how death in of itself is a stepping stone into something else. And as I've said previously to another episode which was controversial, this one is also controversial and actually had many people calling up the BBC and saying, this is not okay, right? I didn't really have that much of a big deal about it when I first watched it. The main problem that people had was the line in that episode of, "Don't cremate me," right? Which is a line said supposedly by these dead people because they can feel things after death. And that's the reason why people are complaining about it, because children watching it will be like, what if a family member of mine has been cremated? Oh no, they can feel that. Oh, right? I understand, but at the same time, it's Doctor Who. They have horror in it. They have real life things in it. And obviously that's not real, right? People can't feel things after they've died. But I understand why people were upset about it. But I think the main thing in this episode, which I really, really enjoyed, was Peter Capaldi's interaction with the new Master, being Missy. And I think the introduction of Missy in his first season was so good. Because I love John Sims' Master. He is one of my favourite Masters. And then we have the introduction of Missy. And she's amazing. Michelle Gomez did such a great job at playing a version of the Master, right? And it's also the first ever rendition of the Master where it's been a woman. And Michelle Gomez did such a great job at portraying the madness of the Master in female form. And we see her quite often later on, and I love that. But I think that first episode for the end of his first season was great. Moving on, though, to Death in Heaven, I think it was an interesting second-parter. I never think, actually, that the two-parters seem to get better in the second part. I thought that with The Last of the Time Lords and the second one, right? The three-parter, Utopia, The Last of the Time Lords, and the last one, unless it's the opposite way around. You get what I mean. Where I thought that Utopia was a good stepping stone, and then we had the next one, and then we had the next one. I think that having a three-parter in some ways detracts from the actual story, because there's too much. With Dark Water and Death in Heaven, I think that the first episode was a lot better than the second, but then there was a lot of really interesting things in the second one as well, with all the Cybermen coming back to life, all of the dead coming back and being Cybermen, and Missy taking control of the whole situation. One of my favourite parts about that episode is the confrontation between Missy and the Doctor in the graveyard, where she's handing him this thing that can control all of the Cybermen and he can have his own army, and Missy's saying, I have no need for an army, because armies are for people who think they're right, and no one thinks they're right more than the Doctor. Which is such a great line to describe the Doctor. He thinks he's right, He knows he's right, and we've seen that from David Tennant's run as well with the Time Lord Victorious.
You should have left us there.
I've done this sort of thing before. In small ways, save some little people. But never someone as important as you. Oh, I'm good.
Little people? What, like Mia and Yuri? Who decides they're so unimportant? You?
For a long time now, I thought I was just a survivor, but I'm not. I'm the winner. That's who I am. The Time Lord Victorious.
He knows he's right. Or he thinks he is anyway. So having an army of Cybermen to back him up would be the best thing in Missy's eyes. Because she doesn't need anything. The only thing she needs is the Doctor. And I think that scene, and especially the follow-up from that, with him saying, I'm an idiot, and I will forever be. I'm just a guy in a box, right? And I think it sums up both of their relationships so well. And the ending of that episode as well was impactful. I think both of those episodes, were very good as a bookend. And it's no wonder that those are ranked quite high for Peter Capaldi's episodes. Moving on to the next season, and starting off with The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar, which is a two-parter once again. I actually really enjoy both of these episodes, and I love the reintroduction of Davros, which we haven't seen him since the 10th Doctor. I really, really enjoyed the moral stories of these two episodes, where the Doctor is faced with the fact that Davros is going to die, or he thinks he is anyway, and he's faced with the situation of going back and looking at it and going, who is this young boy that I have to save in this battlefield? His name is Davros. And it harks back to a 4th Doctor story where he has the choice of destroying all of the Daleks, and he says, if you met a child who one day would become a murderer and kill an entire race, would you then go back and kill that child? It's a moral story of what would you do in that situation? Would you, knowing what's going to happen later on, kill that child? But then if you're killing an innocent person who hasn't done anything yet, that's going to weigh on your consciousness. And I think that's what the Doctor's facing in these two episodes in particular, which makes him do what he does. We see in these two episodes, that Davros is really tricking him. He's forcing this idea of, I'm going to die, and he's putting on this amazing act of, I'm dying. Oh, I can't open my eyes anymore. I can't see the sunset anymore. Doctor, please help me. And the Doctor, being the Doctor, tries to help him, and then he gets betrayed, as if he didn't know that he was going to be walking into a trap, because he actually believed the sorrow of a man who is dying, or who he believed was dying.
Congratulations. I'm sorry?
This is wonderful news. Beyond all hope. I congratulate you.
Why are you saying that?
A man should have a race, a people and allegiance. A man should belong, Doctor.
I really, really enjoyed these two episodes, and I also really enjoyed the relationship between Missy and Clara. Even though Missy is Missy and she betrays Clara, I actually really enjoyed their relationship of Missy telling all these stories about the Doctor and then eventually betraying her and saying to the Doctor, this is the Dalek that killed Clara, and Clara's actually inside the Dalek, and saying, kill this Dalek, you can kill them, no one's here, do this. As if Missy really just wants to be alone with the Doctor, and we know that anyway. It's interesting. I really like it, and I think actually this two-parter is one of the best two-parters that have ever come out, which is interesting because I don't usually like, and I've said previously, I don't really like the two-parters. I feel like the second episode usually doesn't work as well, but this one does, and it was a fresh thing. I liked it. Now, moving on from one two-parter to another two-parter in this season, The Girl Who Died and The Woman Who Lived. These aren't my favourite. I will say, I love a lot of Peter Capaldi's run, and these two episodes, I think, were not good. I wouldn't usually say, oh no, these are bad, right? I wouldn't say they're bad episodes. They're just not interesting. The storyline of me, as in the character me, not myself me. That was awful. I do apologise. The character of me being introduced in these two episodes, and we see the Doctor saving this young girl because she's dead, and he wants to bring her back to life. I feel like she was just an added addition to be like, yeah, this character's going to be coming up later. Yay. Right? I don't feel like it was very interesting, which is a shame, because I think the premise of it could have worked very well, and I don't think it landed very well, in my opinion anyway. The only interesting thing about this episode, and I said I would talk about it earlier, is the fact that the Doctor then realises why he has the face he has, which I really liked. With him looking into his reflection and going, I know why I picked this face and I know what it's for. It's to remember that I need to save people. Because if you don't know, Peter Capaldi used to be in an episode of Doctor Who. He was in The Fires of Pompeii in David Tennant's run with Catherine Tate. And he was supposed to die. His character was supposed to die in that episode, and the Doctor saved him. Therefore, he's chosen this face to remind himself to save people. That's why he saves the character of me. And I feel like, as well, it's also a thing of he's thinking he's doing the right thing, but it ends up not being the right thing. He feels like saving this person will be justified, and it will be a good thing to do because Clara needs him to do it. And we see the ramifications of that later. And I do enjoy parts of these episodes. I enjoyed the Viking theme of these episodes, but that's really all I can say about them. It was okay. Now, moving on to the next two-parter in this season. There is a lot of two-parters in this season. I think most of the episodes are two-parters. Actually, yeah. Only a few of them are singular episodes. Most of them are two-parters, which is really weird. But okay. The next two-parter is the Zygon Invasion and the Zygon Inversion. I love these stories. I love them so much. I love that it harks back to the Day of the Doctor, where the Zygons have taken over and they're controlling people and they're turning into people, right? And it literally starts where that ends, which I enjoy. And I think that's just Stephen Moffat going, I liked the Day of the Doctor, I love the 50th anniversary special, so I'm going to just continue on from that story and do it with the new Doctor. Why not? Obviously we have Clara back, and there's a Zygon pretending to be Clara. When I say I love these episodes, I also am very confused at these episodes. I love the general story in the Zygon Invasion. I much prefer the Zygon Inversion, which is interesting because, as I said previously, I don't really like the second episode of the two-parter, but it's the opposite way round for me. The Zygon Invasion wasn't as interesting, but the Zygon Inversion was much better. In the Zygon Inversion, there was an amazing speech, which is one of the most popular speeches in most of the New Who Doctors, where the Doctor is having this powerful speech where he goes, this is war, and you're acting like children. I've been in a war before, and whatever you're facing right now is nothing compared to what I faced. And it's just a really powerful and emotional scene, and you see Clara watching on from behind because she's heard it before. She knows what the Doctor's been through, but these two people in front of him don't seem to know. Including Kate, which is interesting because she should know. She's read up on all of the things that the Doctor's been through and done. Including the Time War. Which, yes, was retcon, technically, from the day of the Doctor. But it still happened, and he still remembers it. I think that speech in particular, where he's saying, you're just children. You don't know what I've been through, but I know what will happen if you do this. Even though both of the boxes ended up being decoys anyway, or not really working, it just shows the power of the Doctor and what he can do to stop these people from potentially destroying the world. I think both of these episodes are very good, and I enjoyed them a lot. Now, to the technically three-parter in this, as I said, most of this season is two-parters, and then there's a three-parter as well, being Face the Raven, Heaven Sent, and Hellbent. Face the Raven we'll start with first. We have the bringing back of the character of Me. I don't like her. She's actually just a very annoying character. She's very childish for a person who has lived and will continue to live until the end of time. I don't really like her character. And bringing her back for this, it irritates me even more because it's the death of Clara. And it's technically her fault. It's Clara's fault as well, and I said I would talk about this again. That the Doctor has given these people the choices to do what they want, and this was Clara's choice, to take away the countdown clock from someone else to save that person, but then she can't get rid of it herself. And I found that really irritating. I love the plot, but I think that in itself was the most irritating thing that a companion has ever done. That she's that ignorant to her own safety. That she good thing that she wanted to protect someone else, but then she immediately put herself in danger, and then asking the Doctor to try and save her. You've put yourself in this situation. The Doctor can't do anything about it. And you see his anger at Me and saying, I will rain hell on you. Protect Clara. Do it. Or this will be war. And she says, I can't do anything about it. And Clara realises that she can't do anything about it. And that is technically the death of Clara. I put in quotations. Because it's not the death of Clara. But we'll move on to Heaven Sent first. Heaven Sent is one of the best episodes in Peter Capaldi's run, and actually one of the best episodes in the whole of New Who. I really, really enjoyed it. It's a companion light story. Clara isn't there. It's only the Doctor. And I feel like it's such an impactful episode and such a good episode because you're watching him repeat and repeat and repeat all of these situations over and over and over again. And he doesn't feel helpless, right? He's stuck in his confession dial. He's having to repeat this over and over again, but he is not losing hope. When he gets to the end of his time at the confession dial, he's been in there for ages, right? And he doesn't seem to care about it. He just wants to escape. He doesn't have any care in the world that he's been stuck in there for millions of years. That's an exaggeration, but you understand what I mean. Well, it's not an exaggeration, actually, because I think he says he's been in there for like 7 billion years or something like that. That might be an exaggeration. But the fact that when he escapes his confession dial and he ends up on Gallifrey, it's mind-bending to most people who first watched that, because you're like, oh, we're seeing Gallifrey actually genuinely for the first time. We will now move on to Hellbent. Hellbent, I think, is not the worst episode out of the three. I think actually it goes, for me, Face the Raven, and then Hellbent, and then Heaven Sent. Heaven Sent is amazing. And then we get to Hellbent and we're like, okay, it's not as good, but it's okay. It's still okay. It's set on Gallifrey, and as I said, it's the first time we've seen Gallifrey where the Doctor's actually been there. We saw the snippet of in his first season, or at least the beginning of this season, where Clara, goes back to see the Doctor, a young version of the Doctor, on Gallifrey. But this is the actual first time that we've seen the Doctor interacting with other Time Lords, or other Gallifreyans at least, on Gallifrey. And I enjoy the episode, I do. Some parts of it can be boring. I think if you look at it from the perspective of like, yeah, this is the first time we've seen Gallifrey, this is the first time we've seen the Doctor actually interact with Time Lords and go back to where he used to live and have the other Time Lords interact with him like, we're not going to attack you, we're not firing at you. Just because Rassilon says that he wants you to die, we know that the Doctor of War doesn't carry any weapons, so it would be like shooting an innocent man. Which I actually enjoy about that episode. It's good. I wouldn't say it's better than Heaven Sent, but it is better than Face the Raven. I was just going to end it there and move on to the next season, but then something I completely forgot about. Oh, Clara died in Face the Raven. What happened to her now, though? Then I forgot. She comes back in Hellbent. As if all of her character development from Face the Raven, where she's died, and we see the Doctor's loss throughout the rest of Face the Raven and Heaven Sent, where he's literally in the confession dial, going over the events of the fact that he's just lost his companion. It's the first time, really, that we see the actual emotional depth into losing a companion and the lasting effects of that. The reason he's doing what he's doing in Heaven Sent is to punish himself for letting Clara die. And then in Hellbent, he stops the time that, like, he stops the event of that happening and brings her back from the dead, technically. Her heart's not beating, but she's technically still there. She's alive, technically. And we see the end of that episode end with Clara running off in a TARDIS with me. Like, what? Okay, Stephen Moffat. Okay, cool. We will basically never see Clara again until the end of Peter's run. And that's only a cameo, right? It's interesting to leave that there, and I understand if they're using that from a moving off point to like Big Finish audio dramas, but it's still a weird place to leave Clara and her story. I don't really know if I like it, but it is a story. And I will say, though, the end before she leaves to go and travel space and time with me, when the Doctor goes and visits the diner that she works in, or the diner, because it's technically her TARDIS, apparently, I actually really enjoyed. And I liked that because it was really sad, where the Doctor is there and he doesn't remember her because his memories have gone. I didn't mention that either. His memories of Clara are gone. I hated it, but I loved it. The fact that he's completely just forgotten his own companion that he's been travelling with for the last 2 fucking seasons. It's... What? Like, I like that ending, I do, but it is very confusing. And I think if they would have changed it, I feel like the Doctor could have put her back into her time stream and let her die. But no. Maybe, as I said, it's for the benefits of bringing Clara back for Big Finish. Maybe. But, yeah. That was Hellbent, and that was Heaven Sent, and that was Face the Raven. There's nothing more for me to add. Hopefully. Now we are moving on to Series 10, which is the last season for Peter Capaldi's Doctor. This is the season that most people do not like. They do not like it, mainly because it has an introduction of a new companion. Obviously, Clara has died, or she's died. She is not there anymore, so what's he going to do? Is he going to have a new companion? Yes, he does. In the face of Bill Potts. I love Bill. I love her. I don't know, I don't understand why most people don't like this season. I actually really enjoy nearly all of the episodes. These are some of the episodes that actually really make you think of, like, what? The Doctor is very dark. Some of these stories are very dark and very morally interesting. Why? Is it because he's just left a companion, or a companion's died and he doesn't know what to do and he's trying to force himself into being happy again? We start this season with him being a professor and him teaching science, technically, or space and time to students, and that's where we see Bill start. And I think the pilot wasn't the best. It really wasn't the best story to introduce Bill. I think the next couple of episodes after that, like Thin Ice and Smile, were alright. And they actually do show the depth of, like, another companion coming in and saying, why are you the way you are? In Thin Ice, we have the conversation between Bill and the Doctor, talking about how Bill's asking him, how many people have you killed? And he doesn't say anything. And then she says it again, how many people have you killed? And he says, well, I've killed people, yes, but I don't linger on that. If I linger on it so much, then nothing else will change. Nothing else will get better. And I think it shows a lot about his Doctor. He is such a dark version of the previous Doctors we've seen. And I don't think, really, that he's had any moments where it's been really, really thought-provoking and happy. It's always been thought-provoking and sad and depressing, which is interesting. I don't know why that is, but it is the way it is. Now, technically, there is nearly a 4-parter in this season. When I say technically, it's not a 4-parter, but the episodes really link well with each other. That it's basically a 4-parter at this point, which is Oxygen, Extremis, The Pyramid at the End of the World, and The Lie of the Land. Those 4 episodes all have similar themes, and they also work really well together. We'll start with Oxygen first. Oxygen, in the name, it's on a space base, I guess, where they are being controlled, or the suits are being controlled by this thing, right? And to save Oxygen, these people are being transported in suits that have no oxygen in, and therefore they're kind of walking zombies. It's a very weird episode. The highlight of this episode, though, is the Doctor going blind, which I don't care what anyone says about that plotline. I love it. And I think, actually, if they left him being blind for the entirety of this rest of this season, I would have loved it. But I think the fact that they were like, well, we can't keep the Doctor blind for the rest of his season, we've got to change it. It was a decision, but I think it would have been so much better if we actually saw the Doctor dealing with his blindness and not having something to help him see, because he has the sonic sunglasses where he can technically see. And I think if he didn't have that, it would have been so much more interesting. But I do like that. I do really like that plotline. Then we have Extremis and The Pyramid at the End of the World, which is about the monks. I didn't really enjoy these episodes. I found them to be very boring. And actually, I think what they were trying to do was a similar situation to the Harold Saxon thing in David Tennant's run, where the world is being taken over and there's nothing that humans can do about it. There's a power above them which is controlling them and forcing them to do something. And you can't do anything. There's no way of stopping them. They do stop them, but there is basically no way of stopping them in the mind of when that happens. It's okay. It's, as I said, not the best, but I think they were really, really, really trying. The highlights of these episodes, the end couple of episodes, were Missy and the Doctor having their reunion and talk again after the ordeal with Clara and the Daleks before. That's literally, I feel like, the only interesting thing about these couple of episodes, which is a shame. But it is what it is. Now, on to the two-parter of this season, and basically the end of Peter Capaldi's run, aside from the last ever episode. World Enough in Time and The Doctor Falls, which, in my opinion, some of the best episodes in Doctor Who. At least for Peter's run, in my opinion, right? World Enough in Time is so interesting. If you don't, follow the story of it, it's they're in a space station where the top of it, time moves correctly or faster, and at the bottom of the ship it moves so slow that you could be there for years in comparison to the top of it. And the fact that in this episode it has very high stakes of Bill being killed and then turned into a Cyberman. And you see this character this whole time, which it was spoiled already when I first ever watched it, and it was such a shame. But you follow this character around and you don't know who he is. And he's seeming to be helping Bill, but he's actually not. And he turns out to be the Master, as in John Sims' Master, my favourite Master. He comes back, and you're like, oh my god, that's so cool. And what about Missy? Oh, they are reuniting with each other, yay. He's, been messing around, and he's the reason why Bill is a Cyberman now. And he's saying to Missy, what will happen if the Doctor finds out about what we did? He won't forgive you. Even though it's not technically something Missy did, it was something that the Master did. It's an interesting thing. And I really enjoy the Doctor, coming face to face with the Cyberman version of Bill and going, oh. And then the Master and Missy coming up behind her and talking about, this new version of the Cybermen. I really enjoyed it. And the Doctor Falls as well, which is the outcome of the Cybermen taking over, was such a good episode. It's such a good episode. I think the highlights of this episode as well is the speech he has when he talks to Missy and the Master, saying, we've got to protect these people. Do something right and protect these people with me. Stand with me and fight these people. Fight these Cybermen to help these people because they're innocent. And then we get John Sims' Master saying, I don't care. But then we have Missy saying, well, I do. I do care. What has changed now that me as the Master is changed, right? And we've seen this progression this whole time for when Missy was first introduced all the way till now, where she's had this character progression where she's actually turned good, or somewhat good anyway, where she also betrays the Master in this, where she says, it's time to stand with him. It's time to stand with the Doctor instead of fighting him. And it ends with the Master killing Missy and Missy killing the Master. And I love it. It's great. I think this was a good end to his season, and it's not the end, because then we have the last episode being Twice Upon a Time. But I think this was such a good couple of episodes to end Peter Capaldi's run. Now for Twice Upon a Time. Twice Upon a Time I don't think was a very good ending. I think if they left it at the Doctor Falls, it would have been such a great ending for this version of the Doctor. If they added the end of this episode to the end of the Doctor Falls, I think it would have been so much better. I just don't really like it. And I don't really know why. It's an episode where the First Doctor and the 12th Doctor are both debating on whether they should even regenerate, whether it's a thing that they should even do. The 12th Doctor, in a way, is going, I don't really want to change. I don't want to change into someone else, and I think this is the end for me. I'd rather die right here and now. Whereas the First Doctor is then saying, I don't want to change, because he is the first ever rendition of himself, technically. Timeless child storyline be damned. We'll say he's the first, right? So we have the differences between the First Doctor and the 12th Doctor, and it's okay. The whole story basically goes as it's the World War. You know, there's not really much I can say about this episode because it's actually quite boring. The only good thing I think about this episode is the end of the episode, where we see Clara come back, and we see Bill come back, we see Nardole come back, and they're all reuniting with this Doctor who's going to die, or at least he's going to regenerate, and he himself is going to die, and he doesn't want it until he sees his companions and says, you know what, yeah, I will. And his speech at the end, where he's talking to his next version of himself, or he's talking to the Doctor that will then come along, which will be Jodie Whittaker, he's saying all the things that we know him to be. You know, be kind. Be yourself. Be good. Don't fall into this pattern of being what I was like when I first regenerated. And I think from the first ever episode of his first season all the way to this last episode of this season, we do see the progression of him being an old, weary old man who doesn't really like anything, and he thinks that people are stupid, all the way up until the end of his season, where he has friends, and he's gone through a lot. He's lost a companion. He's lost another companion in Clara and then Bill. He's lost nearly everyone. He lost Missy. He lost the Master. He's lost nearly everyone he's ever met in this season. And it's such an impactful thing for him to leave and then still say, be kind to the next version of himself. I think it was a good ending. I do also think that it could have ended at the Doctor Falls. But for what it was, I think it was okay. Now, I didn't touch on any of the Christmas episodes aside from Twice Upon a Time. Most of the Christmas episodes for Peter Capaldi's run were okay. That's really all I can say about them. The only one I really actually enjoyed was The Husbands of River Song, where we see Beryllium, we see the Singing Towers for the first time in, since it was said and mentioned in Silence of the Library. Which I enjoyed. I liked. That's really all I can say about that, because it's just a really fun episode. Where we see the River and the 12th Doctor interact with each other. That's pretty much the whole premise of that episode, and then there's other episodes as well for the Christmas ones. But yeah, I think I really enjoyed Peter Capaldi's run. Quite a few of his episodes were just alright, and some of them were some of the best stories in Doctor Who. It's really up for debate, I think. But I will say that Peter Capaldi is one of my favourite actors who have played the Doctor, along with Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant. I really enjoy these grittier and darker Doctors who really have something to say and a moral towards who they are and what their Doctor is. And I think Peter Capaldi did that very well. Especially because he's a fan of Doctor Who. just like every other fan who watches the show, he is also a fan. He watched David Tennant's run. We see that when he's in interviews talking about how he loves specific episodes, and when he talks to people who have been in Doctor Who, and says how much he loves it. Which I think was such a great decision to cast him, because he knows the show. He loves it, and therefore he wants to do a good job. And, I think they couldn't have picked a better actor to be the 12th Doctor. Now, I did also want to talk about the relationships that Peter Capaldi's Doctor has with his companions. One of my favourite relationships between a Doctor and companion is the 12th Doctor and Clara. I really, really enjoyed their relationship between each other. I think what makes it so interesting is the complete difference in Clara's relationship with the Doctor compared to the 11th Doctor. Her relationship with the 11th Doctor was fully a romantic relationship, very similar to the relationship that Rose has with the 10th Doctor. Something I liked, though, about the difference between the 11th Doctor and the 12th Doctor in relation to Clara is that you know that the 12th Doctor still loves Clara the exact same way as he loved her when he was the 11th Doctor. But because he is this older man, and because he has a change in personality, he has a change in his face and the way he acts in situations, Clara doesn't see him in that same way. At the beginning of his season, we see that Clara isn't really seeing him as her Doctor. When we end with Clara leaving the show, you see that she does have this love for him. When the Doctor forgets her, and she has to go through this emotional experience of saying, he doesn't really know me. And when they're sat there talking at the diner, you can see her face whenever he's saying, I don't remember her. I don't remember her face. I don't remember her voice. I don't remember how she laughed or smiled. It's emotional because you see the difference between her character at the beginning and at the end, and her relationship with the 12th Doctor. She does love him, and we see that at the end. We see the progression of her character and his character throughout their season. And I think it's really impactful to see their relationship change. The same with when we see Bill interact with 12, because it's so much more of a granddad and granddaughter situation. I think he views her in the same way as he did with his actual granddaughter. It's interesting that their relationship is so different to something that we've seen before. And actually, I think their relationship is very similar to the Doctor and Donna. They're not in a relationship because they're so very different. And I like it. I like that we are not having another rendition of a relationship, especially because Bill is a lesbian character as well. And we see that when they're sat together on the bench talking about how, and it's one of my favourite scenes in their season actually, where the Doctor is saying, I don't conform to the societal constructs of gender and their associated stereotypes. And Bill saying, but you still call yourself Time Lords? And he goes, yeah, shut up, right? It is one of the most heartwarming and funny things about their relationship. It's funny. It's light-hearted, which, especially in comparison to the rest of that season, it's a nice change, and it's a nice thing to see. But that is all I have to say about the 12th Doctor's entire run. I think his run was amazing, and I think if you haven't seen Peter Capaldi's run and you've listened to this whole thing with me rambling about how good and how okay some of the episodes have been, I would judge that yourself, because I have my own opinions about these episodes. But yeah, if you want to see me talk about any other Doctor Who topics, any other Doctors, like I could talk about David Tennant's Doctor, Matt Smith, Christopher Eccleston, Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, let me know. But yeah, let me know how you found this, and yeah, have fun. Be happy and be kind.